Hey there. In my scavenging, as I do around the internet and listening to conversations, politely put, it is my habit of trying to analyze and find out why it is people aren't communicating. And they spend a lot of time throwing terms around that haven't been adequately defined. And so in my searching on one of the terms about what a field is, I came across this interesting little thing at physics.stackexchange.com. And I can give you the link for that if you want. I will put it in the chat. But it highlights a problem that is very common, and it leads to other searching, which leads to certain conclusions. And so bear with me, I'll get there. But this person is asking on the Physics Stack Exchange what a field is. And it's interesting, they start out saying, there's a reason I constantly failed physics at school and university. That reason was apart from the fact I was immensely lazy, that I refused to believe more advanced stuff until I understood the fundamentals, which I eventually never did. So right off the bat, we're seeing that a person dropping out of a physics class isn't necessarily because they're stupid. It's because they're not. This person especially is saying you can't explain where your foundational assumptions are coming from, and he never got an answer. And one thing he brought up was about fields. And you've heard me say before that people like Ken Wheeler say that there is no definition of a field, and we'll read a little bit about why he would say that. So this person goes on to say, one of the most fundamental things in physics I still don't understand is the concept of field. No one cared to explain what a field actually is. They just used to throw in a bunch of formulas and everyone was content. This is a common problem no matter what the topic. People are thrown facts, just so stories, and they're content with that. Anyway, he goes on, the school textbook definition for a field, electromagnetic in this particular case, because there are like fields out in the, go outside into a farm and you'll see a field. We're not talking about that. We're talking about field in physics, especially with electromagnetism, which I did a video on before. And he said he remembers it going something like this. An electromagnetic field is a special kind of substance by which charged moving particles or physical bodies with a magnetic moment interact, which is a hard enough thing to follow, a little enough of a word soup or word salad. But they're trying to define what an EM field is, and they call it a substance, first of all, second of all, with charged moving particles or bodies, and that those bodies have a moment interact, whatever the heck that means, okay? And he says, a special kind of substance, are they for real? That is to say, the people making these definitions. It sounds like the authors themselves didn't quite understand what a field is, so they decided to throw in a bunch of buzzwords to make it sound right. I'm fine with the second half, but a special kind of substance really bugs me, so I like to focus on that. So this person is forming a question, what is a field? I'm unsatisfied with the pat answers given in the textbooks, which is a healthy, intelligent response to such things. And he's saying, is it material? It doesn't consist of particles like my laptop or even light. And if it isn't material, is it real? Or is it just a concept that helps explain observations? And that's where we're getting into the blurry line between natural and supernatural. And so he goes on, while this is prone to speculation, I think we can agree that in scope of this discussion, particles actually do exist and laws of physics don't. The latter are nothing but human ideas, so I suspect universe doesn't know a thing about them. That's what naturalism would say. It knows nothing. It is not intelligent, at least if we're talking about raw matter and don't take it on a metaphysical level, where human knowledge, being a part of the universe, makes the universe contain laws of physics. In other words, it goes in circles, and he's just saying this is what theoretical physics, or even more concrete physics, gets into, the brick wall it hits, where you don't really know anything. You could observe things and watch patterns, but that's about all you know. And he says any laws are only a product of human thinking, while the stars are likely to exist without us. messing around. And there is theoretical physics will say that the moon is not there if nobody looks at it. I've seen a quote. I didn't grab that one today, but I've seen a quote from a physics site that the moon is not there if nobody looks at it. And this is all stemming from that double slit experiment, et cetera, where, observing changes reality. And this person is saying, no, what we actually can observe, other than an experiment that puzzles us, is that things are there whether we observe them or not. Especially if people believe standard cosmology, that the moon, for example, is causing tides, which is, a whole different question of its own. But given that that's what they believe, if the moon is causing tides and nobody looks at the moon, would the tides stop? Of course not. So this is where we get into objectivity and observation clashing with what seems to be logical conclusions drawn by theoretical physics, which are based upon erroneous assumptions. And that's the problem that this person has run up against. And he says, I hope you can already see why I hate physics. Is a field not material, but still real? Is the immaterial real, is what this person is asking. Can something not touchable by definition be considered part of our universe by physicians, meaning physicists, not doctors, okay? I used to imagine that a snapshot of our universe in time would contain information, which is an interesting concept of its own, about each particle and its position, and this would have been enough to deserialize it, but I guess my programmer metaphors are largely off track. And he talks about uncertainty principle and so forth. But getting down to the point, if fields are not material, but are part of the universe, I don't see how they are different from the whole Hindu pantheon, except for perhaps a more geeky flavor. And this is really an amazing point to make in a question he's just trying to ask in a physics stack exchange. The channel, The Truth is Stranger Than Fiction, goes into that in, mainly the documentary ethereal. I don't know why I put the wrong ending on all the time, ethereal, and a lot of other videos where this is actually what quantum physics and theoretical physics have turned out to be, based upon, stemming from, and repackaging for the atheist naturalist mind, is Hindu religion. So we are in a kind of a limbo at this point between, in this theoretical discussion, between nature and supernature, the natural and supernatural. Okay, so he's trying to ask this question, and he gets this one response. He gets a lot of responses, but this one is what I'm focusing on. This person uses a programmer metaphor. Okay, I was a programmer, so I understand this. The first point, the math, including a field as a function that returns a value, are the interface. They define for you exactly what you can expect from this object. In modular programming, which is the way things go now, they were not that way when I first started in programming, but you have what are called instances and classes and things like that in software, where you make the tiniest possible building block of logic. Something comes into this block of code, the code does one thing with it and spits out a result. It's, and then that sense, a black box. Okay, even though you can open the box and look inside, it's a black box. It takes something in, it spits something out. Okay, those are the building blocks of modular programming. And so he's saying, okay, picture that. And then the second bullet point is, what is reality? And you don't care how, if you're a programmer. If you've got a box, a class, an instance that does a certain thing, you know that you want a certain result and you give it certain data, and that's all you know. You don't care how it is processing the information. And so this person is using those 2 points about programming to try to explain about fields. He's saying in the case of fields, they are not matter or substance, but are part of the universe and part of physics. I can't make sense of that. Okay? The universe is physical, natural, to use the naturalism term, but they're not material, they're not matter. That's like saying water is not wet. And he looks on for the aggregate effects of exchange of virtual particles. And this is where you get into that virtual reality nonsense, which I hold to be a logical fallacy on its own. There's a fallacy called affirming the consequent. Okay. And it goes, if P, then Q, we have Q, therefore P. I know it's kind of hard, but just let me go through this real quick. If simulation, then it is designed by an intelligence. We have design, therefore it is a simulation. That is a logical fallacy. Affirming the consequent. This is one of the big problems I've gone on before about simulation theory and virtual reality, which is an oxymoron, but simulation theory is based on a fallacy, which is an error in thinking, that just because something is designed doesn't mean it's simulated. So just a little sidetrack on there, but that's where this person is going in trying to answer the simple question, what is a field? Okay, so they really don't know, and they talk about the curvature of space-time in the case of gravity. And of course, as Tesla put it, how can you bend nothing? Space, by definition, is nothing, and time is immaterial. How do you bend time? They made up a thing called space-time just because Einstein made it up, or somebody made it up for him. That's another rabbit trail you can chase, but they have to answer it with fiction. They still don't know what a field is. And this person says, I can't define how these things work. He's going back to the black box idea I mentioned. Unless you simply accept that fields do what the interface says and then study hard for years. What kind of an answer is that? That's not an answer. And then they go on. It was very easy to get hung up on this, is it real or not thing? And most people do for at least a while, but put it aside. When you peer really hard into the depth of the theory, it turns out that it is hard to say for sure that stuff is stuff. They don't know. You run into a brick wall where you can't go back far enough. This is the problem I have with the infinite regression theory, where whether it's, as I mentioned in another video, on the bigger side, the simulation theory side, where you have, our reality being a program run by some kid playing a video game, some alien kid of vast intelligence playing a video game, and we're it, and on and on and on up the scale, and it never ends. Or you go the other extreme, or going back in time, well, this happened because that happened, because that happened, because that happened, and that's where you get the ridiculous question from atheists, who made God? They think infinite regression is some kind of an answer, but it's not. Okay, so they don't know how to answer this question. There is no answer. So somebody called it an amazing and thoughtful answer with a great metaphor. I think it was like watching a hamster run a wheel. But let's go to something a little more solid and observable, where they talk about the laws of thermodynamics. And let me give you a link for that in the chat. And it talks about, I'm not going to scroll through that or anything, but it talks about the laws of entropy, which are the most solid and established in physics. They are the foundation, as this article says, of all other laws. So, how in the Bible, Jesus said, love God, love your neighbor. On these two things hinges the law and the prophets. Everything hinges on these two pillars, basically. Well, they've got those in physics as well. The laws of entropy. Okay. The first and second law are of the most interest right now. The first is the law of energy conservation. Energy is transferred or moved, but the total energy is maintained. This law has no time element. Hey, Bob. Hey, Pillbox. So there, just bear with me as far as the time element. It is not applicable to energy conservation. It doesn't, because nothing is happening except a transfer of energy. The total energy maintains the same. Hey, Vic. But it doesn't care how long anything happens. It's just a state of conservation. The second law of entropy, of the laws of thermodynamics, is the law of equilibrium. And that's really getting down to the point I'm making. Nature seeks to eliminate imbalance, and order is imbalance. The order of the universe is a state of imbalance. And this is verifiable stuff. I mean, I'll get to more of that, but and this gets into the theories of electric universe and people like Ken Wheeler, or the channel that explains him better called Fractal Woman, that I think, was one of the people who came here mentioned a few days ago. But order is a state of imbalance. Balance and equilibrium in nature, which is what equilibrium is, the second law of, like I mentioned, is a state of homogeny. It's a state of everything the same. There is no difference in equilibrium. There's balance. Everything is equally suspended. Nothing's happening or moving. So we have these two laws. Things do move, but that's because they're unequal. There is not equilibrium, and nature wants equilibrium. That's just an observation. Okay, and so what way does nature move when it's left to itself? As the second law states, everything will move from order to disorder in time. So this one has a time element, unless it's acted upon by something outside of the system. And right, so we have these first two laws established. Okay, energy conservation and equilibrium. Those are basically the first two laws of entropy, the first two laws of the laws of thermodynamics. So energy is transferred or moved, but the total amount of energy is maintained, and nature seeks to eliminate imbalance, and order is imbalanced. Therefore, it tries to move from order to disorder. That is why there is entropy. Okay, entropy is the movement, the second law, from order to disorder, from imbalance to balance by itself in a closed system. By naturalistic definition, the definition of naturalism, the universe is a closed system, regardless of the number of nested enclosures there may be. Because I mentioned before about endless regression, it can't change that. It can't answer any questions. Okay, because no matter how far away you go from the universe as we know it, somewhere you reach a boundary that keeps it all as a system. And to presume that energy or matter comes from places we can't observe is to beg the question and argue in circles, because that's what eternal regression does. It doesn't go anywhere. It just says, go far away where nobody can see it, and that's your answer. No, it's not an answer at all. So in essence, the universe is a long and vast series of chain reactions, things that happen because of something else. That's what regression gives you a part of. But naturalism can never explain the ultimate cause of the reactions. They are reactions, not actions. They cannot say what started the sequence. If we can go back, then there must be a starting point. They say there isn't any, but that's just denial. There has to be a starting point. Everything we observe in these first two laws, actions and reactions, say one thing causes another. Well, there must be a first cause. It had to be, if you think of it like a clock, the universe had to be wound up by somebody that wasn't a clock, a force outside of the laws of entropy. This is the very definition of supernatural. And naturalism requires it. And since naturalism cannot answer the question which came first, the laws of physics or the matter they act upon, it's logical to conclude that the universe is not only created supernaturally, but also designed to follow laws, which we derive from observation. That's what this solid physics is all about, is observation. We see that energy is conserved, and we see that it runs down from order to disorder. Hey, Jason. So the laws of entropy that I started off with here came from observation of what nature does. That doesn't explain how it does it or why or how it got started, but it examines what is happening. Okay, and these are very solid, established laws of physics. One undisputed observation, hey, Joe Allen, is that nature abhors a vacuum and all other kinds of imbalance. A vacuum is an imbalance. That's why things rush into it. But this is a description, not an explanation. Nobody can prove why nature hates imbalance, why nature abhors a vacuum. And that's what that person that I started off, going back to that other screen, this person is like, I don't get why this is happening in physics class, never explained it to me. So let me go way back to the top here. I mean, this guy, is just asking valid questions. What is a field? And he never got an answer because it winds up being a circular case of circular reasoning. So we observe that nature abhors a vacuum. We observe that nature hates inequality on a state of not being in equilibrium. And so that's why it hates a vacuum. That's why it rushes in to try to equalize things. And nobody can prove why, because it's philosophically absurd and physically impossible for matter to go from disorder to order without outside intervention, and outside of the natural realm must be supernatural. That is referring to the law of entropy, or the second law of thermodynamics. A concerned citizen. And it's impossible for the world to have created itself. As Carl Sagan tried to say, the universe is all that ever was, because it would have to exist before it existed. Nothing can create itself. It's, nothing can, it is an action by something that exists, and so it would already have to exist. So nothing can self-create. And nature, by those first two laws, is telling us that it is limited and running from order to disorder unless there's outside intervention, and outside of the physical realm is the non-physical. Outside of nature is supernatural. So it is this abhorrence of imbalance that is a cause of all movement and forces. People were talking about forces. What is a force? It's the vacuum of imbalance. Why is there imbalance? You see, you keep going back. And endless regression is not an answer. And this imbalance has a direction. This is where you get into, again, the gravity issue. Why is density and buoyancy have a direction? Why do things stack up according to density? Why is there a direction, an up and down, and not as left and right? Okay, and we get into electromagnetic properties, but mainly we get into this just overall general principle of nature hating being in a state of non-equilibrium. So complete universal balance, if the universe ever reached that point, what it wants to do is what in physics is called heat death of the universe. That is to say, the inevitable result of these physical laws of thermodynamics is that the universe is winding down to equilibrium. That's what it wants, where nothing can happen anymore because nothing is different. And you can't bring such a thing in such a state back to imbalance or order because all the energy is spent. And if you to believe otherwise, such as an eternally self-perpetuating process or perpetual motion machine, basically is what Carl Sagan believed in, that's pure fantasy and it begging the question. All we can observe is that things run down from order to disorder, and they don't go back up unless something outside of the system intervenes. And when the system is the entire physical universe, then what intervenes must be supernatural by definition. Nature itself cannot explain its existence or its laws or its limited shelf life. But here it is. And the only rational conclusion I can reach is that it was made by a first cause, what is known in philosophy as a first cause, which by definition is not subject to the laws of physics and thus supernatural. And since this realm we live in, if you want to call it a universe or a multiverse or whatever, is clearly designed, since it has laws, then the first cause must be intelligent and powerful. These are conclusions I reach because of observation of laws of physics that nobody can really dispute. Although modern fantasy physics, for lack of a better term, tries to redefine these things even to their exact opposites. You can find newer definitions and say, well, this is the old definition, but now we believe it is that order, increasing order, is the natural result of nature seeking equilibrium. It's just nonsense. It's madness. It's a denial of reality. But that's right in line with that Hindu philosophy that article mentioned. So I think it's rational to conclude that naturalism requires supernaturalism, that order requires a cause of imbalance that itself is not subject to the laws of physics, and that this first cause must be intelligent and powerful. That's just step by step how I get to believing in God, and not some space alien who was evolved from some other space alien. Because like I said, that doesn't answer any questions. And that's what this person had concluded after taking physics classes. So I have a Bible verse in the description. Colossians 1:17, referring to Jesus, is before all things, and in him all things hold together. He is the first cause. Okay, he sustains this realm. And this being the Jesus who rose from the dead, of course. Not the Jesus of any other religious or pseudo-religious philosophy. He is not the creation, the same as creation. That's panentheism, which says that there's no difference between creator and creation, as if a piece of pottery is the same as the potter. No. A wise person, I think, would want to be on good terms with their creator. You know, it's like the Bible itself says in another passage that I quoted in a different video. Can the piece of pottery say to the potter, you're a clumsy oaf and you don't know what you're doing? That's what people do in their pride, shaking their puny little fists at their creator, going, you really screwed this up. This is horrible, when it wasn't his fault at all. It's ours. And, you know, collectively, and Satan, the instigator and tempter, everybody's fault but God's. And that's why I think it's wise and rational to not only believe in God, but to believe in the one who rose from the dead, proving which is the right God, who, you know, giving us the identity. The Bible gives us the identity of the creator and how to be on good terms with our creator. And it's real easy, as I've said before. You believe that this Jesus rose from the dead and you trust him to reconcile you to God so that you can be adopted as God's child. That's what it's all about. And then as I've gone on before about many times, there are certain logical steps that happen after that. It's normal for a born baby to start growing. That doesn't mean the baby is dead or never was born. It means there's something wrong. But the baby exists and is born. And so likewise, there are Christians who are born again, who exist, who are real Christians, are saved and going to heaven, but for some reason they're not growing. And that's abnormal. And if you understand the gospel, that's why I question a person like that if they truly understood the gospel, because if you understand you've been adopted and you've been given a deposit guaranteeing your inheritance in your new home and your new family, then you won't mistreat the other adoptees and you won't go around either ignoring or irritating your adoptive parents. But that's, you know, those are the reasons where my faith is anchored and why it is, and that science can never get there without using supernaturalism. So the witness of entropy, as I called the title of this video, means two things. It's what we witness or observe, and it stands as a witness or testimony to intelligent design. And I don't think you can find a better answer than that for why things happen the way they do. Why does nature hate a vacuum? You know, what makes anything happen? How did it start? I don't think anybody, any religion, any science, any philosophy has a better answer than the Bible. So Let me look at the chat. I think I've shouted everybody out. I think I said Mr. Bob there. I don't remember if I think I just looked at your comments. But yeah, if you do know anything about electricity, there's always loss. That is the nature of the universe. That's the nature of nature. Why is it? Why are there physical laws? Nature, naturalism cannot answer that. Physics, real empirical science, or the theoretical nonsense can't answer it either. Can't even say what a field is. So when I'm listening or watching conversations about what is gravity, what's pushing or pulling, whether something's pushing or pulling, why density and buoyancy have a direction, naturalism cannot really, in the end, account for it. All we know is that nature hates a vacuum. And the reason it hates it is because it was designed that way. And it's designed to last a certain time. Hey, Katie. So I pretty well exhausted that topic, I think. You would think a discussion of kind of metaphysical things, the interface or boundary between hard science and theoretical science would take a while, but I've done that time and listened to those conversations, and this is where you wind up. Hey, Jason, pressurized system next to a vacuum is concave. I don't think that follows. I think that's a fallacy called a non sequitur, because you still have a direction and laws of physics that cannot be explained by nature alone, and it certainly doesn't prove any kind of Earth shape. Because there are things that seem to defy gravity, and I've done a gravity video, Down with Gravity, and Earth-shaped videos, and all sorts of things. So I don't think concave Earth answers any questions either. Hey again, Vic. So any other questions about anything I said today? I'm not really talking about Earth shape. I'm talking about forces and laws of physics that have nothing to do really with Earth shape, unless people want to imagine how things form. But if they follow laws, the question I'm focusing on today is where did those laws come from, and why does nature follow them? Let's see, he wants to make vacuum tubes that has no good vacuum pump. Yeah, there's a guy on YouTube that does a whole bunch of experiments with things, and he has a little box with a pump on it that pumps out all the air. It's a tightly sealed box, and he puts things in it to see what happens. But yeah, you can buy those things. I don't know how much they cost, but pretty cool thing to play with if you had one. So nobody could answer this guy's question on the physics stack exchange and what a field really is. They just ran in circles, which is why the guy dropped out of physics class in the first place, because nobody can even define what a field is. And this goes along with what, like I mentioned, Ken Wheeler said, that science can't even tell you what that is. Ken Wheeler can't even tell you really what it is without going into the supernatural, but I think he takes a wrong turn when he tries to go there, because like I said, if you want to know about the creator, you look at what is made and that how orderly it is, and that there is an intelligent first cause of immense, unimaginable power who has put a time limit, wound up the clock and let it run down, not up, as evolution claims, and that we are unable to explain the most fundamental things like fields and forces without getting into the supernatural. Hello, Carlos, Jason. I think I shouted everybody out, but any questions? I never know if there's a class or why they're here or anything. I just present stuff that intrigues me. And as I said, I go around observing conversations and misunderstandings, and that people are on these continual hamster wheels of endless disputing of things without really ever going anywhere. That's why I hesitate to call anything a movement. It has to go somewhere. Hey, Jerry. let's see. I am no physicist, no understanding, but I would think a field is just an area in which an effect occurs for whatever reason. That's about as close as they could come either in the article I was reading. Stuff in a field, but what's the stuff? And they say both that it's material and immaterial, which is not an answer, as this person was asking. So, yeah, Wheeler is, what is the term he uses for himself? Some kind of Neoplatonist, Plato, Neoplatonic, Luciferian or something, He does some cool experiments with magnetism, but yeah, he never really explains it more than any other person does without going into who the creator is. So, I've heard of that scientific Lee. Haven't looked into that yet, but there's also, I mentioned earlier, a woman named Fractal Woman that has a good site for simplifying and explaining terms that Ken Wheeler doesn't do. He's all over the map in his book or in his videos. There's no order to his presentations, and she tries to put order in them, and I think does a decent job. But still, she believes in evolution. She believes in standard cosmology, in spite of also believing in electric universe, as Ken Wheeler does, a lot of other people. The Thunderbolts Project, I think there's pretty well standard cosmology, but as far as believing everything is orbiting and all that sort of thing, and the Earth is hurtling through space, but they understand that it's not the Big Bang gravitational theory is all. So there's bits of truth, but that's what scavengers do, pick out the good parts. So I try to do that anyway. What goes up must come down, but it just is. That's all we can do with gravity, is observe it. And when people try to go beyond that and talk about forces and fields, they have to understand that nobody knows what those are. They can predict and observe them, but they can't explain what makes them happen. And in the end, it turns out that you run up against a brick wall of supernatural causes, the first cause. So, but I don't want to repeat myself on that again. But I still don't think none of this has to do with Earth shape. A job testing gravity. Yes, mic drop. Which I've always thought, it'd be cool, somebody to play that scene of Tyson dropping his microphone and proving gravity, he thinks, and then somebody else come in there and beside him and hold up a helium balloon and let go of it and say, "What's that?" I let go of it and it went up. So mic drops don't prove anything. Helium balloons don't prove anything. They just show that nature hates an imbalance, a vacuum, and wants to make everything equilibrium. And that's what it's trying to do. Regardless of which direction things go, it's trying to equalize. And that's all it's trying to do. Nature hates a vacuum because nature wants equilibrium. And when it finally reaches it pervasively throughout all of the physical realm, that was, like I said, the term is heat death, and nothing can ever happen again once it reaches that point. So the fact that there is inequality means there was a first cause, which I'm skipping some of the steps I went over in detail before, but that's why I believe there is a creator, and Jesus rising from the dead is why I believe which creator is it, and why there's a time limit. God is going to let this run a certain distance, and then he's going to put a stop to it. He is the clockmaker, but not the blind watchmaker of atheism and anti-theism. It isn't his fault that some things don't work right. So anyway, any other questions about the point today about the witness of entropy? Like I said, entropy witnesses in two ways. One is that we witness or observe that it's a fact, that nature does certain fundamental things and we don't know why or how by naturalism alone, and that it stands as a witness or testimony to intelligent design. And then from there, like I said, I posted that Bible verse that shows that it is Jesus who holds it all up, makes it all happen. He is the creator, the agent of creation. This is all scriptural backing. So as a saying goes, as I mentioned to someone the other day, there was an old saying, I don't know, from decades ago, that scientists are climbing this giant mountain, and in the end, they will reach the summit only to find sitting there a band of theologians who has been there for centuries. They know where this is going. And that's why they're working so hard to make sure that whatever people believe about this realm, it does not lead them to the God of the Bible. Like I've said, ABC, anything but Christianity, anything but Bible literalism, really. So here again, shape of the earth does not explain why there is compression, why there is direction. The general principle of nature that we observe, the witness of entropy, is that nature wants equilibrium, and that's all. Whatever direction it has to go to make equilibrium happen, that's the way things are going to go. And where we are on the surface of the earth, regardless of its shape, that direction is toward the surface in most cases. And there are exceptions to that because there are little sub-pockets of inequality that make things go the opposite way, like the helium balloon. So again, concavity does not explain pressure. It just doesn't. It can't. See, in the earth is a good argument. It seems that many European languages, if they distinguish between in and on, they mix the two and don't distinguish. Yeah, people get into that with the Bible versions debate as well, like the mark of the beast being in or on. If you look at the Greek, it's an etching in the skin, basically, is what the mark of the beast is, like a tattoo. But yeah, that's a case-by-case thing. You have to look at the language and the context and the topic and all that. A truth seeker. So we have viewed it, density and equilibrium are layered horizontally, then those that are more dense will fall directly down to equilibrium. Yeah, wherever the imbalance is, nature will try to equalize it. And that's as much as we can say about why things do what they do, why things fall down, why some things don't fall down, why there is density and buoyancy with a direction. It's all about balance in nature. Nature wants balance. And it was designed to do so by an intelligence. And that's all we can really say. So when people endlessly argue about Earth shape or gravity or forces or fields, they really are missing the point. Yeah, the Bible does talk about places inside and under the earth. Beneath the earth is an expression that is understood by the context to mean under the surface. So other than that, I don't recognize that name Siddhartha, although I believe that's a Hindu name. I'm not sure. I think it is. But I've been talking about the laws of entropy and how naturalism depends upon, is derived from supernaturalism because it can't explain its own existence. It can't explain why anything happens, why there are laws of physics. So it's not an answer. It's just a question. It's an observation. Direction is a relative relationship which always drives toward equilibrium, whether it's up or down. Yeah, that's the thing. That's the point I'm been trying in various recent videos to get across, is that the underlying causes are the issue, and people are not dealing with those. They prefer to be on the level of the branches of the tree instead of the trunk or the roots. And it messes with your head. Yeah, it does. But that's why this guy on the screen, the physics dropped out, because it messes with your head and there are no answers in naturalism. Yeah, Miss Bob, that's the thing of, like, we park in driveways and we drive in parkways and all sorts of oddities of English. It amazes me that anybody learns it who didn't grow up with it. Anyway, there are so many things to consider when we're seeking truth, but if you really seek truth, you can't accept as a pat answer, like this physics dropout was wise enough to realize. You can't just accept things as pat answers. At least have some kind of rational, consistent method of finding truth. Talking heads around flat Earth are purposefully attempting to make these discussions tangent. I believe so. I made some remarks today in an earlier hangout on the Hegelian dialectic, because it seems that people on both sides are trying to push toward the middle, which is an interesting phrase from a movie back in the 60s called The President's Analyst. It's a comedy on one level, but it's like a lot of Hollywood movies, even back in the 60s, giving you some true principle. And not so much about, this an analyst being a psychologist that was assigned to the president of the United States, and there's all these spies of different countries and, trying to acquire this guy. And the one spy that he was temporarily abducted by was the Russian spy. And they had all these philosophical discussions while he was in transit trying to take the guy to Russia. And he says that, every day, he made this statement, every day the Soviet Union at that time becomes more capitalistic and the United States becomes more communistic. Eventually they will meet in the middle and join hands. If that isn't the Hegelian dialectic, and that is where the flat Earth, ball Earth debate is going. Yeah, they don't like talk about the dialectic because you can see the agents, knowing or unknowing, on each side trying to drive everybody toward a third point. And it's not Earth shape. It's the nature of reality, which is pushing into that Hindu or ancient Babylonian, Gnostic, Luciferian, theosophical religion that is anti-God of the Bible. And again, The Truth is Stranger Than Fiction channel does a great job of that, especially the two, I think it's a nearly 2-hour video, Ethereal, which shows what quantum physics really is. It's repackaged ancient anti-God religion, anti-Bible God religion, I should say. That's where it's driving. And you can see the forces, if I could use that term, on both sides trying to push toward the middle. Why do you think they always want debates? It isn't, most people who are, the fringe, the hangers-on, the trolls, or whatever you want to call them, are there for their own reasons. But there is always driving forces on these things, and they're driving a whole bunch of conspiracy people toward a third way. And so it doesn't matter really in that debate what side you're on. It matters where you're being driven, and it's away from the God of the Bible. And that's all I can conclude. So, yes, that's what the dialectic is. Thesis, synthesis, or thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. They are pushing you from the edges into preconceived conclusions. And a lot of us are seeing where that's going. And I'm less and less motivated to engage in those environments because I see where it's going. And there are other people, it's hard to get those kind of people together, those of us who see these things, and just dropping out because we know where it's going. It's going to a third way away from truth, ultimately. Vic has a verse here, Ephesians 2:8, for by grace you have saved by faith, not yourself, get to God, not by works. Amen to that. John 14:6, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through him. That is the truth, the central truth, the only truth that matters, and no one can show me a better way. I've said that about atheism. I've said that about other religions. I've said that about including other religions, this quantum physics, masquerading as science. And ultimately, you're going to be back to the decision that we're all put here to make, is between, do you want to be reconciled to your creator or don't you? And that's what Jesus rising from the dead is all about. Yep, getting back to the English stuff there, Truth Seeker, about if this question is phrased usually, if pro is the opposite of con, what's the opposite of Congress? But yeah, that's where we need to be driving people, is to the cross, and especially the empty tomb. and not get caught up in these branches of the tree. We need to stay, excuse me, to the root or the trunk. Yeah, prefixes, suffixes, infixes. Language is a maddening thing that's always changing. We're just trying to communicate, and we're not really very good at it. And that's why there's endless debate, and people like it that way. Keep spinning the wheel, which is something I'm vaguely remembering something from, I think it's Hinduism again, about spinning wheels, these prayer wheels or karma wheels or something like that. To them, everything is a cycle endlessly forever, always has been, always will be. AKA, not AKA, but Carl Sagan, again, with his infinite universe, still doesn't answer any questions at all. So I don't know if you got kicked off. I hope you mean you were just disconnected by your phone or something, because nobody is booting anybody that I know of. The Z-pinch, I'm not sure what you mean by that. I've heard of it, but you need to tell me what you mean by it. Anyway, always keeping in mind that the dialectic is happening, especially in the conspiracy world. It happens in the political world, whatever realm people are in, at whatever so-called level, they're being steered away from the ultimate truth, away from the Creator. And our job as Christians is to show where the true way is. And we need to do better at that. Let's see. Hindus have faulty logic. Your God is our God. Just be nice and don't say yours is the only way. Yeah, I've been over that before. They say there is no such thing as ultimate truth. It's arrogant to say you have the truth, but you're allowed to look for it endlessly. Endlessly seek the truth, but never stop, never get off the wheel, never conclude that you've actually found it, or you're arrogant. That's astrotheology, it's syncretism, it's Hinduism, it's pretty much anybody who says nothing is knowable, which itself is a self-contradictory statement, because they're claiming to know that nothing is knowable, so it contradicts itself. So evidently some things are knowable. And when it comes to if anyone values evidence and objectivity, that Jesus did rise from the dead, he existed and he rose from the dead, and that's where truth is. So that's why I'm a Bible literalist, why I think nobody else has anything better, and why other things are the truly arrogant and proud religions or philosophies, because they won't bow to their Creator. They think they are their Creator, or they think that everybody's the Creator. There's all sorts of variations, but anything but Bible literalism is the religion of the day. So, anything else in the chat? I think I've covered what I wanted to cover. And again, can't overemphasize the need for us to be vigilant and discerning and not get caught up in these secondary distractions, these dialectic opposing sides. Let's see. I would argue that the more proud thing is to say someone else is wrong. Well, it is a double standard. A lot of these people who say, don't say that you found the truth, they will say that what you believe is wrong, nonetheless. You Bible literalists are wrong. Well, you just told me that nothing is wrong. They do that. And yeah, it is egotistical for them to say that. How can they say anyone is wrong, especially at the same time as saying that nobody can say they found the truth? Well, if they can't find the truth, you can't find the false. So, anything else? I'll probably shut down here. Right. And if you know something, you're just saying what your convictions are. And we have, as Christians, as much right to speak our convictions as anybody else, especially those arrogant astrotheologists who say they know and we don't. Well, we can say that about them. And we're just saying what we believe to be true. So, let's see. Those who want to break whatever they build also be building. Yeah. And of course, God, as the creator, the potter, has a right to do what he sees fit with the clay, us. And it is arrogant for the pottery to lecture the potter on how it was made, or anything else for that matter. So those are all scriptural principles. But I think I will go ahead and shut down. I'm just hoping that I made some kind of sense or point that you can keep in mind as you go other places about how people are being steered, where they're being steered away from, why they're being steered, and that the nature of our reality is not as important as what it points to, which is the God of the Bible. Let's see, the pit is a pot. Oh, pot. Okay. I'm like, what? So anyway, I think I will, like I said, go ahead and shut down. And thank you all for coming. Other people should also do good Christian hangouts, and so we have more places to go. All right. See y'all later. Thanks again.